The SEC spring meetings. Oh my God, I know everybody gets so excited about this every year, but the SEC spring meetings are underway in Destin, Florida. And aside from everybody waiting to find out if Jimbo Saban is going to donkey punch Nick Fisher, Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher, man. No, but for real, there are some things going on down there that are going to have a huge effect and impact and eventual change on the world of college football, I think, as we know it, as SEC fans and college football fans in general. A lot of things on the table and being discussed this week down there in Destin. Everything from conference expansion, of course, Oklahoma and Texas coming in sometime between now and 2025, and possibly the addition of some other teams as well. Some rumors that the SEC may be looking to go to 20 teams. So you got your conference expansion, of course, talking about playoff expansion. What is the SEC going to do if the other conferences decide not to expand the playoff? The current playoff format runs through 2025. 2025 is a key year. That's the last year Texas and Oklahoma are in the Big 12. That's the last year of the current playoff deal. That's the last year of the TV deal as it relates to the playoffs. Lots of things are going to change between now and the end of the 2025 season before 2026 starts. So conference expansion, playoff expansion, divisions. What's happening with divisions in the SEC? Well, I think divisions are going away. Sort of. Kind of. I think the SEC is going to go with the pod system. I don't particularly favor one system over the other. Two divisions like we have now. No divisions at all. 4 pods, which would technically be divisions. It doesn't really matter to me how they do it. There's some clear benefits and advantages to all 3, and I think some clear disadvantages as well. I think they're going to end up going with the 4-pod system, though, because one of the biggest complaints about conference scheduling in any conference that has over 10 teams, if you have over 10 teams, you can't play everybody in a year. You can't. The Big 10 right now is the only team that can do that, or the Big 12, I mean, is the only conference that can do that right now. And next year, the Big 12 is not going to be able to do it. So they're going to have, right now, it looks like 14 teams. So they're not even going to be able to do that anymore. So when every team can't play every other team in the conference, right? How do you determine who the best team in the conference is at the end of the year, whether that be having a championship game or not? There's no real way to determine it, right? Right now we have 2 divisions in the SEC. Well, so whoever wins the East plays whoever wins the West, and they're crowned conference champions. But what if there's 2 teams in the West that are better than any one team in the East? Well, so you see what I'm saying. Nothing is going to solve that as long as you have more than 10 teams, because you just can't play everybody. At least with the pod system, though, you don't have to wait 12 years to play a game at someone else's stadium. And that's the state of the SEC right now. You're on a 12-year rotation to play a team at their stadium. In other words, you play a team twice every 12 years. In 6 years, the team will play, for example, everybody talks about Georgia and Texas A&M, right? Georgia has yet to play at Texas A&M. Why everybody mentions that instead of the other ones, I don't know. Florida has not played at Auburn since conference expansion for the same reason. The way the SEC scheduling is set up now, it takes 12 years to complete a home and home within the conference. So Georgia is scheduled right now to play at Texas A&M in 2024, 12 years after Texas A&M joined the conference. It just so happens Texas A&M was last on the rotation whenever they decided to make the rotation back in 2012. So that's why. The pod system would fix that. You'd have, this is post-Oklahoma and Texas, but you'd have 4 pods, 4 teams each. Okay, well, you'd play everybody in your pod every year. So 3 teams would remain the same every single year, right? You have to go to 9 conference games. So you'd play the 3 in your pod plus 6 more. 2 from each other pod. 2 from each other pod. So 4 pods, 16 teams, right? You play your 3. That leaves 6 conference games remaining. You play, let's say Georgia's in pod A. They play the other 3 teams in pod A, right? Then they would play 2 teams from pod B, 2 teams from pod C, 2 teams from pod D. The following year, you'd play the other teams from the other 3 pods. So every 2 years, you would play every team in the SEC And every 4 years, you would complete a home and home. So, for example, if Georgia were to be in a pod with, let's say, Florida, South Carolina, and Kentucky, well, we'd play Florida, South Carolina, Kentucky every single year. Let's say pod B had Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee, and Vandy. Well, in year 1, Georgia would play, let's say, at Bama and at Auburn. And then in year 2, Georgia would get a home game against Tennessee and Vandy. In year 3, it would swap. We'd get home games against Bama and Auburn, right? And the following year, road games against Vandy and Tennessee. And it would work like that for Pod C and Pod D as well. So every 2 years, you'd get an opportunity to play every team in the conference. And every 4 years, you'd get an opportunity to play every team in the conference, both at their place and your place. I think that's where we're headed in the SEC. I don't know if they're going to make any changes, though, before Oklahoma and Texas come in. I'm not sure how much sense it would make to make some sort of a change now, whether that be for this season or the 2023 season or whatever, just to then turn around and make another change in 2025 or 2026 when Oklahoma and Texas come on board. I don't know. It just seems like, let's just deal with what we have for the next 3 years. And when Texas and Oklahoma come in, this is what we're going to do. 4 pods. These are the pods. This is the scheduling. This is how it's going to work. That kind of thing. One of the potential downsides, I think, of going to 9 conference games as opposed to the 8 we have now, there are a lot of huge marquee matchups scheduled as far as 10, 12 years in advance between the SEC and some big-time non-con opponents. I didn't look them all up, but I know Georgia, for example, on the schedule right now has home and homes with Florida State, Texas, I believe UCLA, Southern Cal, Oklahoma, a bunch. If you go to 9 conference games, using Georgia still as the example, well, Georgia already plays Georgia Tech every year at the end of the year, an in-state rivalry game. That puts us at 10 Power 5 opponents. Some of those years in the future, some of those teams, like I know there's years where we play both Texas and Florida State in the same year. Well, if you have 9 conference games, and then you play Texas and Florida State, that's 11, and then Georgia Tech at the end would be 12. Not that I'm against that. I just don't know if any school, Georgia or any other school, is going to be willing to go for that. That would mean no games, basically, against Group of 5, never mind the FCS. So I don't know how that's going to work in terms of if they go to 9 conference games, how much of an impact is that going to have on future schedules that are kind of already in place. Now, if you've been following college football for any amount of time, it's not that unusual for some of these non-con games to end up getting canceled. I've poked fun at Tennessee for canceling Army and BYU just because it's fun to do, but lots of teams do this. Ohio State and Georgia had a home and home canceled for a few years back that ended up getting canceled by Ohio State. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I use that to poke fun of at Ohio State, but the point is there's been plenty of teams that have canceled on Ohio State, right? This is just something that happens. This is one of the problems with scheduling games 10, 12, 15 years in advance. Georgia's got games scheduled right now in 2032. I don't understand the point in scheduling games out that far. So much can change in a year or two, never mind 10, 15 years down the road. So, expansion and pod systems and all that kind of stuff may affect some future non-con games, but I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, spring meetings going on in Destin, Florida. This time of year, there is really no college football news, generally speaking, so might not be that big of a deal to anybody else that the SEC is having spring meetings in Destin. But this particular spring meeting, they do this every year. This particular one, though, probably one of the more important ones they've had in a long time because there's so many moving parts and pieces going on in college football right now. We could be on the verge of the Power 5 no longer being associated with the NCAA. We could be on the, NIL, transfer market stuff, signing days, and, is that going to change? There's a lot of people that don't like early signing day being basically right after conference championship week. What are they going to do about early signing day versus regular signing day in February? Are they going to tighten the transfer window even more? Starting this year, they closed it on May 31st. I don't know. What are they going to do? Something more like what the NFL does, where you only have like a small free agent window and you have to leave one team and join another within that small window, or else you're stuck where you're at? I don't know. But these are all the types of things that are being discussed, not just at the SEC spring meetings, which are going on this week, but every conference does this starting last week. I believe the ACC had their spring meetings last week, if I'm not mistaken. And over the next couple of weeks, all of the conferences have their spring meetings. And these are the types of things that all these conferences are going to be discussing. You know, conference expansion, conference realignment, playoff expansion, NIL, transfer markets, scholarship limits. Should they break away from the NCAA? The SEC batting around the idea of having their own playoffs separate from the rest of college football, which is a horrible idea in my opinion. Texas and Oklahoma, when will they join? Divisions, you know, are the conferences going to keep the divisions? Or are they going to do away with them? The Big 12 has been done away with them a while ago. The Pac-12 is doing away with them effective this year. It would make a lot of sense, in my opinion, for the Big 10 to do away with them. Maybe a little bit of a lesser degree when you talk about the SEC or the ACC, but still, well, even the ACC. Who remembers the ACC championship game from, I believe, just 3 seasons ago? 12-0 Clemson versus 7-5 Pitt in a conference championship game. I mean, who wanted to see that? Literally no one. And that's who watched it. Literally no one. Spring meetings. Nothing would have beat Jimbo Fisher donkey punching Nick Saban, though. Nothing would have beat that. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that. Anyway, let me know down below, what do you think about this kind of stuff? Where is college football headed? Let Uncle Lou know.